precisely because that the old GATT was a developed country, rich countries club. So, but and now these rules, which are more or less the same of the GATT with some adaptation in WTO, they have to be respected. So you have to have a place where you can send your disputes, where they can be judged fairly according to the rules, so that we avoid a trade war, which would be bad for everyone. So,
to the imposition of tariffs.
Well, many are looking to them to see if we can come to something. In the past, we would go to the WTO and ask for the dispute settlement mechanism to solve. But unfortunately, the US, maybe we can coordinate with other countries that are hit in the same way.
So, Rebecca, this system seems to be under, I think it's more than just attack, actually. I don't have to be diplomatic like Wolfgang does. I mean, it seems to me that this old system is dead, and this really is not coming back. How do you then react to that?
Well, two reactions first. We were not happy with the system, but as Celso says, we wanted the rules to be respected because it's worse to everybody. So this is my first reaction. So there were things that needed to change, and I think that we have to recognize that part of the discontent comes from reality. People are not happy. So something has to change in terms of the global economy to be more inclusive. Now, let me just cool a little bit the funeral that you have proposed.
I'm provoking you to have a discussion.
And say that still today, 80% of trade is happening under rules. Trade is still there. And we have the still tariff. But we don't know if it's a negotiation, if there will be a negotiation or not. If there is a negotiation, we are in a different position. If there will be a unilateral imposition of the reciprocity that yesterday Trump announced as a study, that will really go to the heart of the system that we have today. Because reciprocity in the WTO is that you give the same treatment to everybody when you decide to give it to one country. And this is not the reciprocity we are hearing in the announcement of yesterday. So I think that in a way we have also to wait to see it, jeopardizing completely the main rule of the WTO.
Can I push you a little bit on, and you said that ideating tactic. It is a tactic unilaterally whenever it feels like it. I think that is a given now. Whether or not he wants to move to a more...
That's fair. But let me say that also trade has changed. What you are saying is true. We don't like it. It's not that I like it. So I prefer the second worst than the first worst. Because it will be different for the developing countries. It will be different for the world. But let me say that also the structure of trade has changed. 30% of trade today is South-South. 30%, yes? 40% is North-South, South-North, okay? And third has been the really growing part of trade in the last 2 decades, yes? For the first time, South-South trade is so important. Trade area, for example, comes on Africa. It doesn't depend on the US. So the self-reliance of Africa is not only aid, it's also economic growth. Most of the population of the global economy. That's my point.
That's a really interesting point. And Mr. President, I'll turn to that because we spoke about it in the context of aid and you mentioned it in trade. Let's talk about what this, and to use the phrase here, multipolarisation, what is the new system that you would want to create, both for trade and aid?
Well, self-reliance is not only at the national level, but on the continental level. And there's good news coming out of Africa, like she said. Most countries have ratified the protocol on continental free trade in Africa. And that trade is beginning to grow steadily. We're able to export tariff-free into our countries. Of course, there are obstacles because our trade channels have been the colonial trade channels between us and Europe and not amongst ourselves. So one of the things we need to deal with first is how we develop the infrastructure to be able to exchange goods amongst ourselves. Already, most countries are allowing free movement of people, and so if we have free South trade, and that will benefit all our countries.
And do you think that the actions of the Trump administration will accelerate Africans' determination to do this? Will it finally act
as a continent and to trade more amongst ourselves? Because there's a lot of room there for expanding trade.
Is that something that you think would also happen with Brazil? That a focus, a sort of ex-US focus on trade links?
I think so. And I think well, you coming from Britain would understand. The king is dead, long live the king. So the question is, so the new order. And I think that the new order, the South-South cooperation, and maybe some northern countries also as well, that's what we're seeking. I mean, that's what's part of this multipolarization that is mentioned. Brazil, for instance, had opened it, had shut. I hope it will open again. For instance, an office of our agricultural research company in Ghana, in Accra, Embrapa. You know. So I think we need much more of that. And let me say, again, coming back to the tariffs, what sounds very absurd to Brazil is that Brazil is one of the few big countries about, let us say, the same product. It has to be seen globally. So anyway, I'm very pessimistic about the old order, especially what was used to be called an rules-based order, but we didn't know who made the rules, and we go to an order which is really an international law order in which South-South cooperation will be much bigger.
But will it be big southern players, including Brazil, but in a new order committed to free trade rules? I'm coming to you in just a second, but
maybe I could give up to
No, I want to ask the Brazil perspective.
Brazil, I can say that. I was a negotiator, so it sounds self-serving, but I was, together with the British one who represented the European Union, then Peter Mandelson, were the two, and Pascal Lamy, of course, was the Director General, were the people who fought more strongly to keep the Doha route going. Unfortunately, it went away, but the appeals was in a position to challenge the United States without fighting it, just giving it to the judges. And that's what I should do.
I just want to say that we don't have a free trade, even before Trump. Yes, what we had was part of the thing that the developing countries always said. You know, in agriculture, we didn't have free trade. We had problems and problems in access to markets that were very protective, and so. In a way, you know, it's not, we don't want to maintain or to go to a free trade system that never existed. What we want is to have rules of the game, because I really believe that the uncertainty is one of the main difficult points that we have to face. You know, if the uncertainty will hold investment, and don't have investment, we are already in a low growth normal. And so if growth suffer, then the development...
In Africa, greater focus on lots of people who will have questions from the floor to see what the broader... And when the foreign minister arrives, we could ask his perspective. Yes, gentleman in the second row. Could you just wait for the microphone, I think, so that people can hear you on...
I can't hear anything.
You hear...
Hello.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me? Yes. I'm Ricardo La Coleta. I'm a journalist for the Brazilian newspaper Folha de São Paulo. I have a question to the President of Ghana. And the reduction of aid from the U.S. might be a reduction of the U.S. soft power. I'd like to ask if you see any international player today, I'm referring to China, willing to fill this gap, being more interest, for example, to increase its aid and
our cooperation with different segments of the world are specialized. And so with the US, it's been in governance, it's been in education, healthcare, and all that. Our cooperation with China is more in infrastructure and investments. And so building that road, building that railway. Our cooperation with India is in agriculture and agribusiness. With Brazil is with supply of agricultural equipment and machinery. And so, I mean, we have multifaceted international cooperation with different parts of the world. And so when I say US soft power, it's because US AID is very visible in Ghana. And the programs it runs, you know, are programs that project US as a caring nation. And so if we're able to close that gap and shut that out, we'll still have cooperation with different countries. Maybe some European nations might decide to step in and say, look, we're prepared to fill this gap. It's not too large. $156 million really is not a huge pot of mass. But we are prepared to fill that gap. And like I said, it must teach us to be more reliant. I believe that leadership counts. African nations must show leadership. I must say that we also have responsibility of as leaders of African countries to make those adjustments. I mean, just looking at the budget, there are many places that we can cut where we wasted resources before, that we can bring into areas that are of more priority than they have. So there's a responsibility on us to also make the kind of adjustments that help to fill gaps.
Soft power areas, education, Chinese.
Well, I haven't seen China invest in those areas in many parts of Africa. I don't know if it's the US decided to cut. Powers like China, India, and others might say, look, we're going to fill up to those gaps, but I don't see them going in individual countries into those particular areas.
Thank you. There was a question here.
Thank you very much. First, congratulations to our newly minted president of Ghana. And thank you for the things you said. I think that a reliant Africa is really what the world awaits. And so the US decides to retreat. Now, Zani, I love you. I like that you said it exactly as it is. The multilateral order we have now is dead. It is dead. It was dying, but we refused to acknowledge that. And while all the people outside of the supposed rules-based world were complaining, nobody was listening. There was basically a denial of the reality. Now we're forced to confront it. And I think that what's important is for us to agree that this is a moment for a design of what would enable us enjoy the collaborations and the cooperations that we know really helped our system. But it has to be a different kind of multilateral system. Well, Trump is forcing it on us to have that debate. And it has started here. That's why I love town halls.
Thank you very much, and welcome, Minister. I feel a little bad putting you on the spot like this, because you may not even have heard this wonderful intervention, but we've been talking about the impact of the shuttering of USAID. We've been talking about the tariff approach that the Trump administration has been taking. We've been talking, as the title of this session suggests, whether we're building or burning bridges. So I'm going to, this great question here I'm going to put to you, which is the multilateral order dead?
First of all, sorry for being late. The fog over Munich has delayed. Not at all. Not at all. It's existential that we keep it as alive as possible. First of all, because cooperation is always much more powerful than confrontation. Secondly, because we have a world that is more emerging countries that have emerged a long time ago. They're asking just their right place at the table. And thirdly, because there are global existential issues. Climate emergency is the most evident ones, but development, now that we are going to the Finance for Development UN conference in Sevilla in June, in a few months approach. Therefore, what we have and what's needed is to reform the multilateral system, to make it more inclusive and to make it more effective. But we need it more than ever.
But we were discussing, and it is unfair on you to bring you into conversations that you were not part of, but we were discussing this, and the President made the point that this was a moment of opportunity for Africa to essentially focus more on itself and to use the opportunity of the shuttering of USAID to really look at what was essential and what was not essential, to focus on African trade. And so there is, I think, a sense of some optimism here that this big shock from the outside has, or from the biggest component of the international system, has actually shaken things up, but there are some good things from it. So for that, two questions. One, to what degree is Europe going to make up for the very real loss of resources that it seems the US is going to, for thinking about a trading system that is a rules-based trading system when currently the current one is being blown up, basically?
Confronted to pressure or to crisis. We realize that we have, for Spain, Western Sub-Saharan Africa are really our neighbors. And we realize that most of the challenges that we have as European societies, we can only tackle them if we do it jointly with Africa. We are already the first one in development aid in the world, the European Union development cooperation programs with Africa. And we are really adamant, we really believe in African integration. It's the right path. As European integration was the right path for development and for stability for ourselves. That's why we have a high-level dialogue with the African Union and with other regional integration African organizations. Spain has a very deep one with ECOWAS. And certainly, I think this is a moment of opportunities. I think it's a moment, and for Europe, this is nothing new. As I was saying at the beginning, it's confronted to crisis that we realize how much we are capable of doing on our own.
But is that, just to be specific, is that already happening? I mean, funds have been cut off, programs are shuttering. Is Europe going to step up and say, right, we are going to put in more, we're going to take on the mantle of soft power that USAID had?
I was telling you, we have tripled our development aid programs and we have doubled our emergency aid to Africa, and certainly in Africa, and it's having a high-level political dialogue. For Europe, Africa is not a concept. It's a reality. And the development of Africa and working together with Africa, it's a part of how we can solve our own future that in a part.
The Trump playbook is still playing out, and so we want to see where it heads towards. But I was just reading, U.S. farmers are to Africa, and U.S. aid is not doing the auctions that mops up the excess U.S. food. And so the U.S. farmers are complaining. Would do the investments and those U.S. aid handouts to come.
Try and get a couple more questions in.
Especially related to European dialogue or conversation that is going on right now. So I think there is a sense to some extent. So I wanted to ask, is there a way in which the EU global thinking, it's married with a sense of, national security, but at the same time, there is that core link becomes inward looking?
Selfish nationalism is the opposite of European values. Europe was built to avoid war on European soil and to fight against that selfish nationalism that was opposed to the selfish nationalism of your neighbor. So Europe can only exist as an open society. Pluralism, diversity, democracy, or democratic values at the end is the essence of Europe. I'm not naive. Right-wing political parties and forces are growing. And they are proposing something that is completely much linked to open society. And that has a translation to how we relate to the outside world. For European Union, because we are an open society, nothing more normal than belief in free trade. In multilateralism, European Union is, and to believe that peaceful relations with others, cooperation, it's always, as I was saying, stronger than... they claim that they are very nationalistic, but they are all the time receiving foreign interference and foreign influence. And I'm very clear to the Spanish people always, and to the Europeans, this goes against their own interest. Because if we defend democracy, we are not only defeating philosophical ideas or beautiful values, that's the very basis of how we behave and what is the engine of our prosperity and our stability here in Europe, and how we can promote prosperity and stability in the rest of the world.
Thank you. Gentleman here, front row.
And The Economist, in actual fact, recently quoted quite a bit of our research on the growing gap between, for example, GDP per capita in Africa versus GDP per capita in the rest of the world. Basically, what's happening, things are improving, but Africa is falling further and further behind. And also, to quote The Economist, you've written extensively about the extent that we're in an era of globalization, not globalization. The myth of free trade lifts all boats, I think, is under question. So most aid went to low-income countries, and it has made a dramatic... It is still important. It reduces poverty. The reduction in US aid, the volumes that we are seeing, is going to increase poverty. More people are going to die. It is a real crisis on the continent. At a time that our population growth is expanding, population levels are, education is rising, and so on and so forth. So what we see in West Africa, the instability, reflects the kind of developmental challenge. So, you know, you tend to argue that free trade...
Well, luckily, I'm the moderator of this panel, so I'm not going to take time away from our distinguished guests, but I disagree with you. Lady behind you.
Hi, I'm Shir Fein-Grossman, I'm CEO of Israel-Africa Relations Institute, a new think tank. And I wanted to ask about the increasing role of private sectors. I think there is a massive opportunity now with what's happening to incentivize them. So how are you and other African nations intend to do that?
That's one for you.
Yeah, okay. The drivers of poverty do not only have to do with capital and trade, but we shouldn't forget the issue of climate change. A lot of what is happening in the Sahel that is affecting people the least to it. And so the Lake Chad has shrunk to 20 times smaller than it used to be. All the families that depended on the Lake Chad for their livelihoods have become displaced, and they're migrating southwards into the coastal countries. That is leading to clashes between herders and agriculturists. It's a more complex situation than just being able to trade and where capital comes from. But I believe that we must build resilience, and that's where the private sector comes in. We before had believed in state-led development. I think that increasingly the African private sector is leapfrogging with the new technologies, with digitalization and all that. And we must open that space for them to be able to drive economic progress. And so you're right.
So I know there are more questions, but we are running out of time. And I wanted to give one last chance for our panelists to leave you with a concluding thought, because I think this has been really interesting. It's been a panel that has acknowledge the scale of the shock, but really you've laid out opportunities that can be grabbed from it. So could you just leave with perhaps a minute each our audience, both the live stream audience here, with what you hope to see in, let's say, the coming year that would show that this is going to be a moment where opportunity is grasped rather than that we all throw our hands in the air. And maybe, Rebecca, I'll start with you.
Yeah, can I say 4 tweets?
Tweets? Well, it depends how many characters they are, but yes, okay.
My first tweet is that private sector will go to Africa if the multilateral development banks do what they have to the developing countries. If not, it won't happen. When you try only for the private sector to go alone, is very little money. So if you want to scale up, you have to take risk. Multilateral development banks have to come in. Second, you have point is that you need a trade system that is able to have the flexibilities that the world needs today. So instead of throwing the rules down the drain, we need to reform the trade system too.
That's 3 tweets. So give me one thing that you expect or would like in the next year that would signal we're going in the right direction.
I would like FFD4, the Financing for Development conference, for Europe really to come together to help us in the final consensus that we need for FFD4, building on the Pact of the Future.
Thank you. Sasa Amorim.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, I agree almost entirely what Rebecca said. I'm not so confident on the finance for development outside. We had I'm not speaking of Spain, but I'm speaking more generally. One of the things that are making difficult the European Union, Mercosur. I think if I would make a summary, what we really need is a new global governance, a global governance that reflects the world of today, not the world of the 20th century. You follow the rules of the Vienna Conference, of the Vienna Congress. So we are totally out. This is true of the World Bank, this is true of IMF, this is true of the United Nations. So I think what we have, which is the closest thing to an adequate, representative and effective forum, is the G20.
That's the building block of the new system.
I hope it will be the year in which we will see alliances to be created. And Sevilla and the fourth and what we can call the Western world, alliances between the public sector and the private sector, and alliances around things that can seem like evidence, but we see that in today's world are not evidence. An alliance around peace, an alliance around development and the way Africa can access to finance.
And will those alliances include the US?
I hope so. It's a big country and the natural ally of European Union.
Seems to be going in a slightly different direction right now. Mr. President, the last word is yours. What are you looking for in the next year?
I see trade growing exponentially amongst African countries. And I believe that Africa has the human resource. We have young, bright people who are willing to grab innovation. And we need the leadership to drive that energy to make our countries prosper. But I do believe, as a student of psychology, that in all adversity, there's opportunity, and new orders spring out of disruption. The disruption that is taking place now is going to yield a new...
Disruption that is happening now will yield a new order. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you all.
Thank you.
together. Let's chill together on Valentine Chocolate Day with our live band. And we've got some giveaways just to share.
It's a date. Friday, 14th February at 8 p.m. Live on GTV.
There are strong women whose stories teach us perseverance, logic, decisive, emotional, intellectual, and mental strength. Women's Voice is a platform to hear and share stories to encourage women and girls. Women are the real architect of society. It is they who provide the foundation of power, grace, wisdom, justice, creativity at 4 p.m. on GBC News and a repeat on Saturdays at 4 p.m. on GBC News and Sundays at 3 p.m. also on GBC News. Women's Voice. No one can make you inferior without your consent.
Ethiopia is one of Africa's most beautiful and fascinating countries, and a surprising travel destination. From spectacular mountain landscapes to vast lakes and mysterious deserts. From incredible historic landmarks to vibrant modernizing cities. It is the only country in Africa that was never colonized by Western powers and has a rich cultural heritage, which evolved during times of kingdoms and empires. While Christianity and Islam are the main religions, Ethiopia is also a patchwork of many different ethnicities, customs, and traditions, including tribes that have retained some of their lifestyle. In this video, I will show you 10 beautiful places I visited on a journey through Ethiopia in 2019. At the time of editing this video, Ethiopia is in political and military conflict with the northern Tigray region, which is causing great suffering to ordinary civilians. Like most people, I hope all parties involved can come to an agreement and start rebuilding this incredible land. As a result of the conflict, some of the places in this always follow travel advice and consult local guides to avoid putting yourself and others at risk. Ethiopia, to visit the incredible monolithic churches of Lalibela. Little can prepare you for the sight of these structures that are carved entirely out of rock. Began some 800 years ago, during the reign of a king named Lalibela, who, according to legend, wanted to build a new Jerusalem and center for Christianity. Today, Lalibela remains an important place of worship for the Ethiopian Orthodox community. And you can see pilgrims praying and chanting in all corners of town, especially during Sunday Mass.
የሰይጣን ከዚህ በኋላ እኮ ትልቁ መመሪያ ትልቁ ትምህርት ከዚህ ይዘው ነው እናንተ ነው መላእክት ይጻፉና እንዴት ይቆጥ የሰራነውን ማይፈራ እግዚአብሔር ይሳ
Traveling to the Danakil Depression is like stepping into a different world. This is one of the hottest and most inhospitable places on earth, and can only be reached with experienced tour companies on an overnight expedition. But for those who make it here, a surreal landscape awaits, with sulfur springs, bubbling volcanoes, acidic pools, and salt lakes. While traversing the vast desert, you may come across groups of nomadic Afar people busy cutting chunks of salt out of the plains. They spend weeks following an ancient salt route, eventually selling or exchanging their salt on local markets. Set in a landscape of sandy desert and sharp peaks is the located in the troubled worship in Ethiopia, if not in the world. Built halfway up a sheer rock pinnacle, Abuna Yamatagu can only be reached via a steep and sometimes terrifying 2-hour climb. The site is managed by 20 or There are over 100 other rock-hewn churches in this region. Striking Simeon Mountains National Park is one of Africa's most beautiful ranges. Years ago, as a result of countless volcanic eruptions that created a plateau with jagged peaks and pinnacles. Today, it offers travelers plenty of opportunity for short hikes and longer treks, on which you are likely to meet Kavada baboons, nicknamed as bleeding heart monkeys. These sociable monkeys are unique to this area and can live up to 4,500 meters. Of Ethiopia's most visually striking monuments, with royal palaces, churches and castles, The city flourished for over a century after Emperor Fasilidas made it its capital almost 400 years ago. Due to its strategic, original buildings remain intact or have been renovated, including the beautiful Fasil Gebi fortress and the unusual Fasilidas bath. Far north of Ethiopia lies Aksum, a small city with great historic significance and civilizations, the Aksumite Empire, which dominated trade in this region for many centuries. Aksum is filled with ancient sites, including the eye-catching stelae or obelisks that served as tombstones and memorials, and the remains of the Dungur, popularly known as Queen Sheba's Palace. Church of Saint Mary of Zion may be the most compelling reason for people to visit Aksum. According to Ethiopian legend, this is where the famous Ark of the Covenant is hidden, in a small but strictly guarded chapel. After traversing the north, we arrive in the center of Ethiopia to visit the bustling capital city, Addis Ababa. Home to more than 5 million Ethiopians, Addis attracts people from all over the country to work, study and live. It's a vibrant metropolis and serves as a great introduction to Ethiopian culture and food. Addis is a sprawling city, and navigating the busy streets can sometimes feel challenging. However, there are plenty of areas to visit, including downtown Meskel Square, the city's old town, some great museums, and my personal favorite, the crowded Mercato, said to be the largest market in Africa. South Ethiopia is a distinctly different land from the north, with Arba Minch as one of the main cities. But it's not the urban life that attracts travelers to Arba Minch. Rather, the spectacular Nechisar National Park. Located in the Great Rift Valley, Nechisar boasts two of Ethiopia's largest lakes. One of them, Chamo, is especially popular for its big populations of crocodiles. You can also spot other wildlife here, such as pelicans, hippos, and the charming olive baboons, who may casually wander around the garden of your hotel. Set in the cool mountains near Arba Minch live the friendly Dordtse people. Known for their towering homes made from bamboo and ansete leaves. These leaves are also the main ingredient for kocho, a bread-like fermented food that is sometimes used instead of the famous injera. Cotton weaving and pottery are important sources of livelihood here, as is agriculture. The Dordtse grow their own coffee beans, and visitors are often treated to an Ethiopian coffee ceremony with freshly roasted beans, grounded on the spot. We finished this journey through Ethiopia in the Omo Valley. The area of Konso is regarded as the jumping-off point for the valley, with incredible villages built on terraced hillsides, among sometimes surreal, eroded landscapes. A region that is home to a wide variety of ethnic groups, who all have their own character that gives travelers a chance to get up close with some of Africa's most unique tribes.
Shanae.
Traveling here comes with great responsibility, as these destinations often run the risk of turning into so-called human safaris. Make sure to interact with people and get to understand them before considering to take any photos. Tourism can have a positive effect, and for some of the villages it's an important or even crucial source of income. But it's important that it happens in a respectful and meaningful way. If anywhere I would recommend hiring local guides, it is here. And that concludes my journey through Ethiopia, a beautiful country filled with amazing people, spectacular landscapes, incredible wildlife, and unique cultures and traditions. I hope this video gave you some new insights. But above all, I wish the people of Ethiopia a safe and promising future. Take care, everyone.
And we offer a sweet something for all.
Egg Crush? How about the first time you exchanged I love you, your first fight, and how you made up?
All these memories and more, put the pieces of your love puzzle together. Let's chill together on Valentine or National Chocolate Day with our live band. And oh, we've got some giveaways just to share.
It's a date. Friday, 14 February at 8 p.m. live on GTV.
There are strong women whose stories teach us perseverance, logic, decisiveness, and self-confidence. Being strong is not just about physical abilities, but also emotional, intellectual, and mental strength. Women's Voice is a platform to hear and share stories to encourage women and girls. Women are the real architects of society. It is they who provide the foundation of power, grace, wisdom, justice, creativity, and hope. Join us live every Monday at 4 p.m. on GBC News and GTV, Wednesdays live at 4 p.m. on GBC News and a repeat on Saturdays at 4 p.m. on GBC News and Sundays at 3 p.m.
Hi, this is GBC Client Service.
Hello, thank you for calling.
GBC provides you the platform to amplify your brand reach. When you advertise on our 7 TV channels
and 18 regional and district radio stations across the country,
please reach our sales department at sales@gbcghanaonline.com and telephone numbers 0303 959604 and 0303 959605.
For all customer care issues, reach us by email care@gbcghanaonline.com and on telephone 0309 59606.
GBC, still the most authentic voice.
Meet Kwame. He's not just any Kwame. He's Kwame the TV license legend. Kwame knows that by paying his TV license, he's supporting GBC, our public service broadcaster, and he's making a real difference. Kwame's contribution helps bring our communities closer together. Because of Kwame and others like him, we will all have access to amazing TV programs, educational content, plus broadcasting infrastructures are maintained and our culture is beautifully promoted. So GBC is asking all to respond to this civic obligation and pay your TV license fee. For individuals, it's 3 CDs per month or 36 CDs per year. If you have multiple sets, meaning 2 or more in your household, it's 60 per year and you pay the invoiced amount directly to GBC. So let's all take a moment to appreciate Kwame, the TV license legend. Wherever you are, just dial *447 *333# and follow the prompt. It's your civic duty, so pay your TV license today. GBC, the authentic and trusted voice of Ghana.
Into the country.
This is Agona Yakum, and behind me is a bridge, of course, on the river Accra, which is one of the major rivers within this area.
More about the people's expectation ahead of election 2024.
Get to know more about Bono and Ahafo regions.
Residents of Kambali and Dobile can now heave a sigh of relief following the construction of these culverts even during the rainy season. Reporting for Real Time, Salah Abdul Wahab. Wow.
It is also anticipated that within the next 10 years, Okwasi and its enclave will become self-sustaining, self-reliant economically, socially, with or without gold mining.
Up to central government, they are looking up to you and I to have a convenient learning environment for them to be able to rise up to be responsible citizens in this country.
AM and on Fridays at 1 p.m. It's a season of love and chocolate on 14th February or 9